So hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glen Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by personal trainer, health and lifestyle coach, as well as entrepreneur, Declan Treanor. How are you doing, Declan?
I'm doing great, Glenn. Thanks a million for having me on the podcast. Absolutely delighted to be chatting to you. Having followed all the great work you do on LinkedIn, so I'm chuffed to have been asked to come on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. And we speak a lot on these podcasts about sort of the new focus of work and digitalisation, but mental and physical health are often forgotten, a vital part of life. But as the world of work changes, how we live and doing it properly sometimes gets forgotten. So, Declan, could you give us a little bit of your background, how you got into this sector, but also say a little word about the world of work, how it's changing, and what we need to be thinking about?
For sure. So just a little bit about my own background and how I ended up in this. So I'm from Ireland and grew up playing Gaelic football. So our national sport, and was big into that and got to a good level in that. And what I noticed having grown up in that environment, which could be at times quite masculine, and there's this kind of stoic mentality of really trying not to show weakness, was that at times you'd see a lot of people in great physical shape, but maybe mentally or emotionally they weren't as balanced on that. So for me, I realized from quite a young age that health isn't about being really great in one area, like having the perfect body, because you can be struggling in terms of this overall holistic approach. And that's really where my whole mantra for my company board kind of came out of. That was unlock your potential through mind, body and soul, and trying to find that balance. And I think it's really important to say here that for me, that balance isn't about perfection, because perfection and a desire for perfection, which will never arrive, can lead to burnout. So it's just literally taking pleasure and making efforts at those different areas of life. And having actually worked in a consultancy, as when I came out of college, I saw a lot of things from a cultural standpoint that I actually thought could be done better. And I also saw something that I believe in fully, is that health and work are not mutually exclusive, that they're actually mutually beneficial. So this idea of task reorientation, so the ability to actually step away from a task and not feeling like I always have to do something to completion, can benefit the overall quality of the task as well as your health and well-being, because you were able to take that 5-minute break and maybe do a stretch or go for a little walk and come back with a fresh set of eyes and benefit from this, what we call task reorientation. And so there's loads of different things we all know, and I won't bore listeners with, let's say, in the science of what exercise does for your body, because we all know that those healthy endorphins get engaged through exercise. And when we can tie this into our week, and I don't mean every day, but like that can bring your best self to work. You're going to look fresher, you're going to feel fresher, and these things all tie in. So I think that's my biggest goal, is just to have people realize that health and work aren't mutually exclusive. It's part of the one picture, and trying to bring your best self to work through looking after your health, wellness and personal productivity.
Well, I think great advice there, Declan. And one of the things I think that, given the pandemic we've been going through for the past 18 months or so, more people are working from home, they're working remotely, they're not having sort of the office life. How can people be making sure they're doing all the things that you say now in this kind of remote working situation? Does it make it harder, or what do people need to think about?
Yeah, so I love that question when you were sending these through to me in advance. So I jotted some things down. So forgive me if I'm looking down to my pad, but there's a couple of little ones I want to make sure to mention. So for me, the first thing to mention around technology is, and we've all seen the good and the bad of technology, in terms of sometimes the pressure that social media can take to people's life. It's just a highlight reel, and I think that's a really important thing to remember. Even on LinkedIn, we're very rarely seeing the struggles of people. So just as long as we know that we're using it as a means of communicating a positive message, great. but that remember to take what you see on LinkedIn as a pinch of salt, and not comparing ourselves or feeling behind because people will post their success stories. So just taking social media with a pinch of salt. But good or bad, technology it's simply a means of communication. And I think Zoom or other, Microsoft Teams, whatever the medium was, it did do a great job in helping us to stay connected throughout COVID. And now we're coming to this transition period. Now, the one thing that's really important to mention around this, and this is true, this is going to be true post-COVID as well, is the addictive nature of technology and the fact that we have notifications coming in on our phones, and how do we manage that? Because a big part of work-life balance is distraction freedom. So if you have pings on your phone, the science and how the brain works is we get a pleasurable squirt of dopamine every time that we react to our phones and we click into those notifications. So the bottom line is the more we do it, the more addictive it becomes, and there's this distraction loop there. So I think it's very important to manage that as best we can, to realize we can't concentrate on two things at once. So even on Zoom, you might have found this yourself during meetings, that actually the chat function can become quite distracting sometimes when somebody's doing a presentation and there's all these comments coming in. It's quite difficult to concentrate on two things at once. So I would suggest that people just become aware of, particularly now that we're fully engaged, particularly when we're working at home, we're potentially on Zoom a lot. It can be a good idea to set yourself some watershed moments in your day whereby, I'm going to switch off from technology at a certain point in the evening. I know particularly parents, it might be beneficial for them to have the flexibility whereby they can go back on maybe 7, 8 in the evening because they wanted to get the kids to and from school, etc. So, but do try and manage it in such a way that you do get a little break at different stages of your day from technology. The other thing I would say is don't let it substitute real engagement. So, where possible, pick up the phone. Like, we've probably all been in the situation where we could have picked up the phone and resolved something in 5 minutes, whereas we let it linger through an email thread for the full day, right? And I think that is so important, whether you're in the office. If it's in the office, it's popping your head into somebody's office, knocking on the door. Or now if you're keeping a hybrid model going, or you're going to stay working from home, it's, maybe picking up the phone and just grabbing somebody for 2 to 5 minutes. And I think that can help with actually building up your own confidence in the sense of public speaking as well. And, there's this fear of almost rejection, or that you're bothering people, whereas you've got to think about how you welcome people on the phone. Do you actually react like that? And the answer is, not really. So we got to test maybe our own sort of thoughts around that and put ourselves out there a bit more. So I would try and just urge people to try and find a balance with that. And also for newcomers in this hybrid work model, they may not have the ability to pop around the office and get these sort of introductory coffees. So just in terms of a bit of empathy, when we see these newcomers arrive to the office, maybe look to line up a little Zoom introductory meeting with them and make them feel welcome. I think is an important one. So they were just a couple that I jotted down on the technology side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think also the fact is that sort of people are working in different ways. And forced to take more responsibility for their own physical health as well. So you talked about there, going for a walk, doing some stretching, just basically making the time, because it's very easy to choose something else and say, oh, I don't have time. But of course, there's 24 hours in a day and you can always fit things in if you want to. So it's kind of like a mental piece as well, to make sure that you're doing these things. And as you were saying before, Declan, the medical evidence is there that you're always going to feel better, and the benefits will speak for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. So what you've mentioned there is time management. Now, so what I'm going to urge listeners to do is, the number one BS excuse that I've heard as being a personal trainer for many years about why people don't exercise, you might have just guessed it based on what you said, Glen, was but I don't have enough time. And you said it, we've all got the same 24 hours in the day. And if you can't make 10 to 15 minutes for a little bit of stretching, or even 3 minutes to get up from your desk at some point and stretch, that is a BS excuse, because we all can and create that time. So one thing I would say is, please don't, like, if you're going to take anything from the chat today, is don't say I don't have the time. Say I'm choosing not to make the time. And that might sound harsh, but that's taking personal ownership, because where we put our time is a choice. And I think that's the big thing. And also, when we can flip the switch on exercise and change it from I should work out this evening to I could work out this evening. I could is actually a better one, because that helps us acknowledge that we're choosing to do exercise. Like, this is something that we're choosing to do for our bodies, to treat ourselves. And exercise doesn't have to be an absolute wipeout, killer workout at the gym. For some people, it is doing a yoga routine. For other people, it's doing Zumba. I just urge people to move in a way that they find fun. And, like, you know, the benefits just pay themselves back no end. And I do want to mention just a few stats on that, Glenn, just in terms of the workplace. So the average worker is now sitting on average 9.3 hours a day. So if we're going to be doing that, I would just say a little very, very simple suggestion in terms of getting set up from an ergonomic standpoint is, and you can test this yourself, you can literally sit on your hands and feel your sit bones.
Yeah.
And when you feel those sit bones, just slide your hands out from underneath, and you'll notice that already by sitting on your sit bones, your posture is going to improve. So that's one little hack. So if we're going to be sitting on average 9 hours a day, let's try get that right. The other one that you mentioned in terms of these building it in to your day is what I call the healthy habit loop. So this is the last point I'll mention on this, but it's the 3 R's. So it's reminder, routine, reward. So a little calendar reminder, maybe at 11 and 3 o'clock, let's say, because there are 2 typical times people talk about this little slump in energy. A routine then could be a very simple stretch routine. I'd be happy to share a YouTube link with you, Glenn, if you could share it maybe in the show notes. Just for people. So having some sort of movement routine, and then the reward is, your body feels better. You might feel more energetic on your return to work. And actually, one last thing that's just coming to mind is sedentaryism is the new smoking, in my opinion, and it's defined as 5,000 steps or less per day.
Right.
It's linked with 35 chronic health conditions. So one thing I would say to people is try and ensure you're getting above that 5,000 threshold, and even a little effort goes a long way. So if you can get out for 75 minutes of brisk walking in a week compared to that sedentary state, you're already going to really improve decreasing those health risk factors I mentioned from being leading a sedentary lifestyle.
Wow, these are fantastic tips, Declan. Really good, and just things that you can actually take away, implement immediately. It doesn't need a great deal behind it. It's just sort of the small steps, as you say, and like everything in life, the small steps take you to larger steps, and that's how you sort of get the big journeys. It's not doing the massive things. And I think you're right. And I think people in life tend to underestimate the small things and overestimate the big things. And I think that just those changes like that, absolutely essential to be able to make the developments. And at the end of the day, we've only got one body. We might as well look after it and do the best we can with it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. The vehicle, the vehicle through which we're going to experience the moments of our life. And again, it's not perfection. It's not about never eating takeaway or having a few pints with your mates. It's just about this balance, right? Because again, for some people, having a few pints is good. It's a social thing. It helps them relax. Again, for other people, they choose that's not good for them. They mightn't like alcohol. They mightn't like that. So they then go for a different approach where they might drink non-alcoholic beers. They like to have something lined up early the next day. Whatever your lifestyle is, there's no right or wrong with this. I think it's all about just that balance that you mentioned. And I think one thing that people can definitely do as well with this hybrid kind of work style is always try and create a bit of psychological distance when you finish work. So for me, it used to be to come home and put on a comfy pair of tracky bottoms and a hoodie, so I could feel like, okay, that's my part of my day is kind of closed off now. For other people, it might be coming in, giving their kids a hug, some sort of ritual that just is like creates a bit of psychological distance from from work. And the other one that's been massive, Glen, just during this period of COVID has been sleep. So sleep is being mentioned sort of everywhere at the minute. For me, exercise and nutrition are the ones that people reach for first, but I would say for sure that sleep is a forgotten pillar that's coming to the fore more now with the stress levels people have encountered over the last year. And it's so much easier for the little things to gnaw at you more when you haven't slept well for a period of time. So I would say it's definitely worthwhile spending a little bit of time around your sleep. And I'm talking about not just longevity of sleep, but quality of sleep. So looking after your sleep cave. Is it quiet? Is it a reasonable temperature? Because and again, this is the one thing I'd say about alcohol consumption is 1 or 2 glasses is fine. But if we're having that sort of sleep induced, that alcohol induced sleep, that quality is going to be nowhere near as good if we're kind of looking after the body and keeping hydrated and things as well. So getting plenty of water into.
Absolutely. And I think that these things are absolutely vital. I think they always were, but I think now that the world of work is changing, the hybrid models that you're talking about there are becoming more common. And the fact that people need to take responsibility for these things. No one's going to tell them what to do necessarily, unless they find a trainer and a coach like yourself, Declan, to be able to put these things right and put them on the right track in terms of the steps that they need to take, and the commitment, the dedication, and the kind of the ritual side of things, I think is absolutely crucial, so that they put themselves on a better track now and also into the future.
And what's great is that some workplaces are now investing in this and they're getting people like me in to do maybe a series of talks, or getting what I call someone like me in to do performance surgery. Sounds scary, but for me, it's actually more of a health and wellness deep dive. That's probably a softer way of putting it, but it's like I would sit down with Glen and I'd chat about you, and I'd say, how are your energy levels, your positivity levels? Not a psychology session, more of a general wellness check-in. And yes, we can talk a little bit about mindset, but again, when it comes to mental health, that might be more, it's more just talking about optimal mindset. How are you doing? How are those exercise levels, energy levels, and having a half an hour chat around that. So I've done that. That went, was something that went reasonably well with a company there during lockdown, was having these individual check-ins and then a little follow-up email with individuals. So there's always the option of group presentations, individual deep dives with people. I think one thing I'd mention about a couple of things just on the changing nature of work, because I know you wanted me to refer to that, was obviously that's changed dramatically now, and there'll be no fully turning back because work has changed so much in the last year, everyone being forced to go online. So it has been changed out of all recognition in the last year. We have to live with that because it's not going backwards. Sometimes from the company standpoint, because they've now realized what they can save in terms of rental and office space in some scenarios. And then from the worker standpoint, because from a health, wellness, and personal productivity standpoint, a lot of workers have found that they've actually benefited from this working from home arrangement, often saving hours on their commute. Think of what that's doing to people from a health and wellness standpoint. So I would say companies, there needs to definitely be this element of empathy when it comes to negotiating a return to work, realizing, how people have benefited from this, and trying to find that solution in terms of a sort of a win-win situation when they return to work, to keep getting the best out of them. The influence, and that's my next point, is in negotiating working conditions, has swayed dramatically to the employee, because if they can prove working from home is viable, and that they remain to be a strong and proven member of the team, then there is going to be more and more requests for this hybrid model. Again, it would have been considered maybe suspicious in the past, and there would have had to be these big levels of trust between employer and employee. So I think that's something that that level of trust needs to be thought about. And then the last 2 little points I'd make here is, I would say the employee needs to work a way forward where tech is beneficial and not harmful. So again, that idea of managing your notifications, managing those sort of those watershed hours. And then the last one is just, I think what's really important is the mental health resources for this transition back to work. Like, many people suffered from the transition initially to working maybe a lot on their own. And I certainly, I had my challenges with that as someone who works as an entrepreneur. So that we all had different challenges. Some people were living alone in the last year. Some people were finding it quite intense living with people and finding that space. So I think definitely, maybe some mental health resources or optimal mindset workshops for people on the return, but more on the empathy piece, little check-ins with your team, talk to them about their unique situation, make them feel listened to, and try and manage it that way coming forward, because that way you're going to get the best out of them, you're going to get the best out of your team, and you're going to build the kind of culture that you want to be a part of. So that's just a couple of little points, I think, around managing the transition back.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic advice there, Declan, and really appreciate your time today. I will include a link in the description to the to the clips you were talking about. I will also include your details so people know where to find you. So for today, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and thanks for the advice.
For sure, Glenn. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch.